Subcommittee to order. And I want to thank you for attending this afternoon's hearing on the Coast Guard. It is an honor to take the time to, in the Oceans and Great Lakes Subcommittee, to hold this important hearing. This committee and the Senate are working on a number of important initiatives that impact the Coast Guard, including the fiscal year 2022 funding bills, historic investments in American jobs in the infrastructure bill, and protecting against the impacts of climate change through the Build Back Better budget. And finally, work is already underway on drafting the next Coast Guard authorization bill. The administration's budget request for the Coast Guard for fiscal year 2022 seeks to make significant investments to improve the readiness and capabilities for the Coast Guard and to improve the quality of life for Coast Guard members and their families. Of the $13.1 billion requested for the Coast Guard, $1.6 billion is included for procurement, construction, and improvement accounts. I will be interested to hear from you whether this funding level is sufficient to support one of the largest acquisition periods in Coast Guard history, which includes programs like the Offshore Patrol Cutter and the Polar Security Cutter. Unfortunately, this budget request does not adequately plan or budget for the impacts of climate change, particularly for construction of Coast Guard facilities that have long been underfunded and are in need of replacement due to the effects of climate change. This concern also extends to the fact that the budget does not include funding for an additional Great Lakes icebreaker. Increasing icebreaking capacity on the Great Lakes is critical to facilitating commerce and transportation in winter months, and icebreakers also play a critical role in preventing flooding, which has been exacerbated by extremely high water levels, as well as irregular and large ice flows made worse by climate change. Additionally, I'm concerned with the Coast Guard's recent approach on Buy America policies. I'm discouraged by the direction the Coast Guard is taking on procuring critical components like engines and shipboard service diesel generators on programs like the Polar Security Cutter, and I'll be interested to hear how the Coast Guard is considering the health of the American supplier, our industrial base, and the total life cycle costs associated. This will continue to be a priority for me as chair. Finally, while the U.S. Coast Guard has made commendable progress in areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, women make up only 23% of the officer corps and only 15% of the enlisted workforce. I'll be interested to hear in your testimony and answers about the progress made on improving representation of women as well as racial and ethnic diversity within the Coast Guard. As chair, I will make it a priority to ensure that we are conducting oversight on all Coast Guard issues, from acquisitions like the future Great Lakes icebreaker to personnel issues, including diversity and support for women and families. Accordingly, today's hearing will be a little different. We will hear testimony from both the Commandant and the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, Master Chief Vanderheyden. Admiral, thank you for being here today. You are no stranger to this committee, and Master Chief, welcome. I look forward to hearing from you about how Congress can invest in the Coast Guard's most important resource, its people. Thank you both for being here today. And with that, I'll hand it over to a great advocate for the Coast Guard and a great colleague, Ranking Member Sullivan.
Well, I want to begin by thanking Chair Baldwin and congratulating you, my colleague, on the chairmanship, and I look forward to working with you again as we have as chair and ranking in past Congresses. So thank you. I think we're off to a great start, and I want to thank our two distinguished witnesses today, the Commandant of the United States Coast Guard and the Master Chief Petty Officer of the U.S. Coast Guard. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for your service and for the great men and women you are privileged to lead. You know, Congress has given the Coast Guard a wide range of missions, from search and rescue, icebreaking, marine environmental protection, port security, drug interdiction, international crisis response, and readiness to support Department of Defense operations. Maritime security and safety issues of national security are essential to our economic security and our national security. Global stability is dependent on safe and unfettered access to the maritime domain. I have great appreciation for the work that you two gentlemen do and that the men and women of the Coast Guard do for this nation and for my state. During my time as chair of the subcommittee in the 116th Congress, we held, I think it was 7 hearings on the work the Coast Guard does day in and day out, so other members of the Senate and the American people could get a better sense of the great work that you and the members of the Coast Guard do for our country. Many of these hearings focused on the Coast Guard's efforts in Alaska, with more coastline than the rest of the country combined and a large portion of our ocean and fisheries. That discussion in the hearings often focused on the need to expand Coast Guard assets and resources in a region of growing global and international focus, and that is the Arctic. I'm pleased to say Congress has made significant progress in this area. In just the last few years, we have authorized 6 polar security cutters, the 2 of which are now fully funded, and we are working to fully fund a 3rd. We have invested over $513 million for Coast Guard infrastructure in Alaska and continue to fund new classes of vessels, all of which will aid in the Coast Guard's mission, whether in the Great Lakes, in the Arctic, or projecting power across the globe where we need it most. The Arctic has quickly shifted, I have a couple slides here, from an area isolated from the rest of the world to what is now clearly referred to as the region of the next great power competition with regard to Russia and China. Both countries are all in on the Arctic. Russia has over 50 icebreakers, while China is building their 4th. They claim they're a near Arctic nation, whatever the heck that means, because they're not that close to the Arctic. Russia, in addition to over 50 icebreakers, has opened 16 deep water ports, 14 airfields, built Arctic military bases, and even formed a new Arctic Northern Command, all in the Arctic region. Vladimir Putin has called the Northern Sea Route the next, quote, Suez Canal in terms of its importance for shipping, and has threatened to sink any foreign vessels that do not have a Russian pilot aboard or a Russian escort vessel. We have seen U.S. fishing vessels legally fishing in our own EEZ forced out of our own EEZ by armed Russian warships and aircraft. We have also recently observed 3 Chinese warships patrolling off our Alaskan coasts. Without persistent U.S. presence in the Arctic, we risk leaving an opening for these type of aggressive actions to continue from these 2 countries in particular. This next graphic depicts the Arctic and shows the 2 prominent opening sea routes because of the receding sea ice, the Northwest Passage and the Northern Sea Route. It is an expansive area that is remarkably difficult to operate in, incredibly remote, and while operating is still often covered in very thick sea ice. The Coast Guard's Arctic strategy states, quote, the Coast Guard must be able to provide physical presence at will to uphold sovereignty, carry out operational missions, promote freedom of navigation, and fulfill other national and international obligations. I could not agree more. It is foolish to think, however, that the U.S. is currently able to have the ability to operate in the Arctic, particularly when compared to Russia and even China. We don't, and that needs to change. That said, the Coast Guard is making progress at closing this gap with the leadership represented here today, with consistent deployments to the Bering Sea, updates to shore facilities and capabilities, and ensuring robust international partnerships in the region. I was happy to see the success of the Healy's current transit through the Northwest Passage. These types of deployments demonstrate our ability to operate in the region and our commitment to ensuring a free and open Arctic region. These operations must not only continue, but I believe must increase. That is one of the reasons why I will soon be introducing legislation to increase the influence and capabilities of our United States Coast Guard in the Arctic through persistent presence in that critical region. Without further investment in our polar capabilities and without continuous U.S. presence in the Arctic, our adversaries' influence will grow. If their influence is allowed to continue unchecked, we risk the ability to protect our vessels, U.S. vessels, conducting commerce, conducting fisheries activities, enforcing international law, and therefore we need the Coast Guard more than ever. I want to thank our witnesses again for participating in this hearing today and thank the chair for her leadership on calling this important hearing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ranking Member Sullivan. We will now turn to our witnesses for their opening testimony. We will start with Admiral Schultz and then call upon Master Chief Vanderheyden. We will include your full testimony in the committee's record, so please try to keep your remarks to 5 minutes in length.
Well, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Sullivan, and it's an honor for the Master Chief and I to appear before you today and before two great supporters and advocates for the men and women of the United States Coast Guard and the missions we do across the globe and across the nation. The United States Coast Guard remains keenly focused on the three strategic priorities or lines of effort mapped out in our 2018 to 2022 strategic plan. And those are, first, maximizing readiness today and tomorrow, addressing the nation's complex maritime challenges, and delivering mission excellence anytime, anywhere. Let me start by thanking the committee for your enduring support of the U.S. Coast Guard and our efforts to tackle these strategic priorities. The fiscal year 2021 Consolidated Appropriations Act helps sustain critical momentum to address service readiness, specifically noting attention to Coast Guard surface and aviation fleet recapitalization, the injection of much-needed funding to improve our aging shore infrastructure and information technology, and essential investments in our Coast Guard workforce. Building off this momentum, the fiscal year 2022 President's budget request reflects these same readiness priorities as we look to provide our workforce with the capable assets, the resilient infrastructure, and modern systems they need to conduct operations and meet both current and future mission demands. To close the Coast Guard readiness gap, we need sustained operations and support budget growth of about 3 to 5% on an annual basis. With your support, we continue to build the nation's first new heavy polar icebreakers in nearly half a century. Completing the Polar Security Program of Record will provide the global reach and the icebreaking capability necessary to ensure sustained operations in the polar or the high latitude regions. The Polar Security Cutters will enable the United States to project sovereignty, protect natural marine resources, counter malign actors, and respond to new mission demands caused by receding ice. Continued progress on the Offshore Patrol Cutter program is vital, as these cutters will replace our legacy fleet of 210 and 270 medium endurance cutters, which have served with distinction, but so for many decades. Yet they are becoming increasingly expensive to maintain and require extraordinary efforts by our personnel. Despite these Herculean maintenance efforts, this fleet of medium endurance cutters has lost roughly 11% of its operational capacity over the past 2 years, and that is a degradation to frontline mission performance. I'm increasingly concerned about our ability to sustain operations with our legacy rotary wing MH-65 and MH-60 helicopters, as 65 Dolphin parts are increasingly hard to locate. Hence, the Coast Guard must immediately transition towards an all MH-60 Jayhawk fleet. To meet today's standards for both energy efficiency and resilience, we must update our shore facilities. The fiscal year 21 appropriation provided substantial support here, and the 22 budget request makes continued investments in this important infrastructure. The Coast Guard must also keep pace with the industry's technological advances, particularly those confronting the marine transportation system, a key economic engine for our nation that generates $5.6 trillion of annual economic activity and supports more than 30 million jobs. We must ensure the MTS's safety, security, and its reliability. Today, our service remains at an inflection point with respect to service readiness. Modern assets, facilities, and technology will help close our readiness gap, enable our workforce of 54,000 active, reserve, and civilian members to focus their efforts on operations and the solving of complex problems to deliver mission performance. On top of the day-to-day operations across our large mission portfolio, the Coast Guard is increasingly called upon to respond to significant incidents, accidents, contingency events, and new mission demands created by climate change that have major impacts on our nation. Between the years 2015 and 2020, the Coast Guard surge personnel and assets responded to 12 major hurricanes, that's Category 3 or larger, and numerous other tropical storms impacting the homeland. Wildfires in Oregon and California, flooding in the heartland, emergency at the southwest border, and support to Operation Allies Welcome, not to mention support to the Bahamas in 2019 for Hurricane Dorian, and this past summer's earthquake on the South Claw of Haiti. Our complex operating environment and challenging missions makes it critical that we harness the full power of the background, experience, and imagination of every member of our Coast Guard workforce. Myself and senior leaders across the organization remain fully committed to fostering an environment that provides an inclusive and rewarding journey for all Coast Guardsmen in our quest to be a service increasingly reflective of the American public we are honored to serve. We must position ourselves to be an employer of choice in a highly competitive marketplace for talent. I could not be prouder of your Coast Guard men and women executing their multi-mission responsibilities both at home and abroad, particularly against the backdrop of the ongoing global pandemic. They stood the watch with both peak professionalism and unmatched resilience, and with your continued support, we will remain Semper Paratus, always ready. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
And now, Master Chief Vander Hayden.
Thank you, Chair Baldwin, Ranking Member Sullivan, Ranking Member Wicker. Thank you. Just coincidentally, my last two trips were to Alaska and to Wisconsin, so I feel like it's good to sit in front of you. Yes. I want to join Admiral Schultz in extending my utmost gratitude on behalf of the men and women of the Coast Guard for your enduring support of our efforts to restore service readiness. We're an armed force of the United States and the nation's lead maritime enforcement agency, and we're a maritime safety and regulatory agency. The men and women that I represent today truly make up the finest Coast Guard in the world. Our dedicated Coast Guard members are on the front lines every day, carrying out operations globally and protecting our homeland's maritime domain from constantly evolving threats. Your support ensures they can focus each day on those difficult missions with the full knowledge that their housing, health, and family are well taken care of. I am extremely proud of the entire Coast Guard workforce and their ability to persevere through the COVID-19 pandemic and the myriad of challenges we've faced as a nation. As I travel around the country and speak with the troops, our morale is high. Our dedicated workforce understands the importance of their service to their nation and the challenges we must overcome. The current challenge I am most concerned about is our ability to recruit and retain the workforce needed to operate our cutters and boats and aircraft. As we replace our aging assets, the new cutters, helicopters, and planes being built require us to grow our workforce now so that we are prepared to operate and maintain these technologically advanced resources when they arrive. Although today we enjoy the highest retention rate of all the military services, we will need to retain the future workforce at an even higher rate to meet the increasing demand both domestically and abroad. Coast Guard leadership is taking a proactive approach to improving our retention by analyzing, evaluating, and mitigating the causes that may lead members to leave our service early. We have contracted with outside agencies for several studies to provide the Coast Guard with recommendations to remove retention barriers and to provide a better quality of life for all our members. Based on these recommendations, we implemented several workforce initiatives, including adjusting assignment policies to facilitate the co-location of dual military families and modernizing the body composition program to adopt a compliance method similar to what the Air Force and the Navy are using. We also updated our parental leave policy to allow for 120 days of leave for any primary caregiver and created a program where Coast Guard reservists can be called to active duty to backfill members when they go on prenatal, maternity, convalescent, and primary caregiver leave. These updates definitely enhance the quality of life for our members while maintaining our high standards of readiness. Policy changes are just one avenue to improve retention, but policy change alone is not enough to retain our best and brightest. We developed an action plan to reinforce the importance of inclusive leadership at all levels, especially leadership by example. And we started at the top of our enlisted workforce to demonstrate our commitment to good leadership. We completely changed our advancement process to Master Chief Petty Officer. And this new process includes a panel that conducts a thorough review of our members' records with an emphasis on selecting proven leaders who exemplify our core values of honor, respect, and devotion to duty. We have also stepped up our leadership game by expanding the availability of mentoring. Our Office of Leadership recently launched a new mobile-enabled mentoring program to connect mentors with mentees through traditional one-on-one mentoring on a global basis. This industry-proven app-based mentoring program provides flexibility to people searching for a mentor. This technology enables mentors from across the service to connect with mentees from across the service to connect with mentors of their choosing and gain valuable advice and insight to better manage their careers. I recently spoke to the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Chief Joanne Bass, and the Air Force is evaluating the use of the same mentoring program. Not often the Air Force copies the Coast Guard, but I think we hit a home run with this one. As we build the Coast Guard workforce of the future, we recognize the important imperative to be an employer of choice that reflects the public we serve. This summer, the RAND Corporation finalized a study to identify barriers in recruitment and retention of underrepresented racial, ethnic, and gender minorities in the active duty workforce. We are already implementing initiatives to ensure members from underrepresented minority groups can thrive, and our senior enlisted leaders are excited to roll out these vital improvements. Your Coast Guard is hard at work to attract a talented and diverse workforce, and I appreciate this committee's commitment to create a Coast Guard ready to protect and defend America's maritime domain. Thank you for inviting me to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. I want to start this round of questions by talking about the Great Lakes icebreaker. Climate change does not mean the end of cold winters in the Great Lakes. In fact, 3 of the worst Great Lakes ice seasons of the past several decades have occurred during the last 7 years. By one estimate, these 3 winters cost our region's economy approximately $2 billion, with 10,000 jobs lost due to reductions in maritime commerce and the resulting impacts on manufacturers in the region. Climate change is also contributing to more extreme weather events, larger quantities of precipitation, and higher lake levels. During the winter, this results in greater risk of flooding because ice collects in rivers to form ice dams. Our communities rely on Coast Guard icebreakers to break up these ice dams and prevent flooding in our communities. From transportation to saving lives and property from flooding, we need more icebreakers. And that's why I'm fighting for a new Great Lakes icebreaker to be funded in our current budget reconciliation bill. Admiral Schultz, yes or no, do you support funding for a new Great Lakes icebreaker in the reconciliation package?
Madam Chair, funding in the reconciliation package, absolutely in support of that.
Great. I appreciate your support, Admiral. During the Lake Michigan ice jam caused flooding last winter, the Coast Guard's only Great Lakes heavy icebreaker was not available. And smaller icebreaking cutters struggled to break through that ice jam. While the Coast Guard eventually accomplished their mission with the current assets, if a second heavy icebreaker had been available last winter, the Coast Guard could have provided more flood relief more quickly. Would you agree?
Senator, I don't have all the specifics around that. I would say clearly more capacity and a bigger breaker versus a small breaker, that's sort of common sense. I would say, depending on what's going on at the time, we could find one breaker, in one part of the Great Lakes. Having sailed up there, it's quite a great distances. But I think additional capacity, additional heavy capacity capability is probably a positive there that could lend to better outcomes there, yes. Thank
you, Admiral. Now I wanted to turn to the importance of Buy America policies. Initial procurement costs for major programs like shipbuilding are only a part of the total life cycle cost. In fact, probably less than 1/3 of the cost, with sustainment being a significant portion of the overall cost. Over the last 18 months, we have also seen complications arising from the disruptions in supply chains when foreign sources are involved. With nearly all of the Coast Guard's assets undergoing transition to new platforms, this is really an opportunity to assess how the Coast Guard is making acquisition decisions with total life cycle costs and the health of the domestic industrial base in mind. Some past decisions on sourcing critical components have resulted in or are likely to result in more money being spent to support unproven components than what might have been saved in initial acquisition. I'm concerned that recent decisions on components for the Polar Security Cutter are heading down the same path. Would you be willing to commit to working with me and the ranking member and the committee to ensure that your acquisition plans take into consideration the entire life cycle costs and recognize the value and importance of our domestic industrial base?
Madam Chair, let me start sort of in the reverse order of your question. So to your last point, we absolutely recognize and support, the United States industrial base. Specifically with respect to the Polar Security Cutter, we will certainly explore the ability to support, the engineering, the major components through the full life cycle cost. We do believe the plan we have with the CAT mock engines, that have already been purchased through long lead time material, and we have assurances that we'll have sufficient engines through the building of the 3 Polar Security Cutters, a 30-year plan to support those engines. Given the complexity in the build and how that ship is built around those engines, it would be a very difficult stage if we're talking about revisiting that decision. If we're talking about, other places and other fleets, possibly medium breakers, the Great Lakes Icebreaker, I think very much that conversation. I think it's a difficult conversation on a ship that we, through a consolidated contract award, we've actually slipped the delivery date to the third quarter in fiscal '25. But that's, some part injected by the fact we haven't built an icebreaker in a half century, the COVID complications, a lot of international collaboration that really didn't lend itself to Zoom-type calls. There's face-to-face. But we're trying to do a very ambitious program of building a heavy icebreaker, again, undone so in 50 years on a compressed timeline. I think that engine decision would be very difficult to reopen at this point without tremendously long delays. And I believe there's a support system for the full life cycle cost of that platform that'll be there. CAT's a very much established distributor. But on a broader case to your question, yes. To that specific one, I think that's a little bit of more challenging conversation to open up at this point.
All right. Ranking Member Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Admiral, I want to begin the discussion talking about IUU fishing. And as you know, that's not simply illegal fishing. It's a resource problem, a security problem. It's often intertwined even with human rights violations. And I know that the Coast Guard has been working hard on this issue, but it's a challenge. And we are seeing increasingly that it's a challenge, particularly as it relates to the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese fleets that are literally scouring the world and often trying to hide their IUU involvement. Can you just give me an update on what the Coast Guard's been doing, and are there things that we can do, we, the Congress, to bolster the Coast Guard's ability to counter IUU fishing, to better expose those responsible? There is a lot of bipartisan interest in this issue for the reason I just mentioned, and we're going to be working on legislation, but we certainly want the Coast Guard's input.
Ranking Member Sullivan, thanks for the question, and you're absolutely correct. IUU, illegal, irregular, unreported fishing, is a global challenge. When I was up in Newport with the world's Coast Guards and Navies in 2018, that was sort of the epiphany for me as services and many of the world's navies look more like the Coast Guards. I was bombarded with questions about how do we work together on this, less about counter.
And other countries need our help,
Yes,
smaller
sir.
countries.
Not about CT, not about counter narcotics. They want to talk about fish. And I was back there this fall with the CNO, more of that again. So there's ecological, damages that's near, coastal states. Their resources are harvested, and those benefits do not make it back to the coastal nations. Those benefits make it out to a
Hurts the ability for
transport ship, right, sir.
sustainable
Yes, sir.
fisheries.
Sustainable fisheries, a food sustainment issue. You look at the rise in projected growth on the African continent population-wise, 40% of the protein derives from the ocean there. This is a global problem, sir. What we've done in 2020 in September, we issued what we call a 10-year strategic outlook.
Right.
And this is not positioning the Coast Guard to be the world's fish cops, because we don't have the capacity for that. We are trying to take a lead role to stitch together like-minded thinkers, like-minded nations. We need to partner with NGO. We need to partner with academia. There's a lot of capabilities out there. We need to figure out how we share information and how we illuminate that. If you look in the east and west coast of the African continent, east and west coast of South America, we saw the 350 China flag and/or China characteristic, maybe South American flag, but probably in opaque processes. We sent a national security cutter down there in the course of 3 or 4 days, identified at least a couple dozen vessels where their AIS, their automated information system, didn't correlate with their activities or their position. We see the same challenges off the African continent. So I think what we can do is elevate that. I think what the Congress can do is articulate the importance of this. It's been mentioned in the NDAA before. I think it's about collaborating. I think when I go back to just the projected operation and support budget for the Coast Guard, that steady growth for the Coast Guard allows us to attenuate this on a global scale. It's a big bite we're taking off, but I think, sir, we're a recognized leader. We bring a voice of credibility to that. And what we want to do is take a nation like China, and we say responsible flag states don't send their vessels 9,000 miles away and have no China Coast Guard there sort of making sure they follow the
And
rules.
try to hide what they're doing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, look, we look forward to working with you on this. I think there's a lot of bipartisan support for this kind of action in the Senate, and we will be reaching out to you and your team on help on next steps in terms of legislation. I mentioned in my opening statement the issue of monitoring foreign military exercises. As you know, that massive Russian exercise in the American-Alaskan EEZ in 2019 was quite disturbing, and I mentioned some of what happened. What have you done? What has the Coast Guard done in terms of lessons learned from that? I do think there were some things in which the Coast Guard was a little bit late to the game in terms of informing our fishing fleet. What are the kind of lessons learned, and what's the Coast Guard's plan to protect U.S. fishing fleet if similar events were to occur in the future?
Yes, sir, Ranking Member Sullivan. So I would say, yes, there are things we learned. The Russians, as a nation, have the right to exercise in international waters as they're doing.
But they don't have the right to shoo off.
No, sir. They did issue.
Alaskan fishing vessels.
They issued what's called the Hydroland, which is what they're supposed to do. We realized between the fishing community and that product for advance notice of what you're doing, there's some communications breakdown. So we're working that middle space. I think at that point, an uneducated crowd up there that's just legitimately fishing has a right to expect to continue fishing too. So it was a function of people not having situations.
You're not kind of besmirching the fleet. You're saying they just didn't. They didn't know.
I'm saying because they didn't know, I think they got caught up in a situation where, hey, they felt like, hey, they're being muscled out of there, and they weren't.
Right.
And had the system worked and they'd been educated, hopefully they might have chosen to not fish in a hot area, and we could have alleviated all that. But that said, we need to recognize the rights of the Alaskan Fishermen, and if the Russians are operating and exercising in places where they didn't do the correct notifications, there's obviously a rub that we need to be cognizant of. I think some of that is a presence conversation. Are we up there actively? It's how do we work that middle space to ensure a hydroland actually gets in the hands of an Alaska fisherman operating on the Bering Sea, and that's the place where we have some opportunities for improvement, sir. So we want to try to avoid that tension point. And again, I'm not here substantiating what Russia is or isn't doing. I'm saying they did not do anything that is internationally in violation because they filed the right notification. There was a breakdown in process, and we have tried to sort of walk that back and address that going forward. Hopefully it doesn't repeat itself.
Good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, and welcome to both of our witnesses today. Thank you for your service to our nation, your extraordinary commitment to the Coast Guard. Commandant Schultz, I just want to make sure that I know the answer to this question. I think I do. The Coast Guard Museum is a continuing priority, and you'll work with us in seeking additional funds, correct?
Senator, I am absolutely committed to the establishment of the National Coast Guard Museum in New London. We're working with the National Coast Guard Museum Association, yourself and your Senate counterpart, Senator Murphy, and the rest of the Connecticut delegation. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I've been disturbed by reports that I've seen just recently about merchant marine cadets who have been victims of sexual assault while at sea. And I realize the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy is separate from the Coast Guard, but the Coast Guard is responsible for investigating these incidents. And I wonder if you could tell us whether you've seen an increase in the numbers of reports, whether you are disturbed. I would guess you're disturbed by any report of sexual assault at sea, but has this problem been increasing in number of incidents reported?
So Senator Blumenthal, it's aberrant behavior to think about someone, whether it's a member of our naval services or someone that's a merchant mariner, would be sexually assaulted at sea. So I take great offense with it. We have had less than 10 cases, over the last 10 years, less than 10 cases, less than 1 case a year. It's actually been 5 cases. So it's not a lot of cases that are making to the Coast Guard. We have investigated each of those 5, referred them to the U.S. Attorney's Office for action. We had 1 case where we went after an organization, a shipping company that didn't timely notify. But I suspect there's probably a gap there between actual behaviors occurring at sea and the amount of reporting. So I think there's some opportunities to work collaboratively with MARAD and Department of Transportation and shipping companies to make sure these terrible actions are being reported and then being actioned. But we stand postured to action with our Coast Guard investigative services. What's difficult is these ships are at sea, rotational crews, sometimes 300 days a year. So things about gathering, even when we have a case, getting to the ship, preservation of evidence, there's a lot of complexity. But that said, I think there's an area where we all need to do better.
And probably also in preventing them in the first place.
I think clearly prevention is the most important part of this. And then when we have to respond, we have to be aggressive and accountable, hold people accountable.
Thank you. I understand that you are committed to implementing the goals and objectives of the recent RAND report. There was a report in August released by the RAND Corporation. It found a need for more diversity, equity, and inclusion. I wonder if you could update us as to the progress on recommendations focusing on outreach and recruiting, career development, advancement, promotion, those goals within the Coast Guard.
Thanks, Senator. We're absolutely committed. The underrepresented study by RAND was the second. We did a holistic women's study previous years, and that has helped us, and we've closed retention gaps. We are stepping out with equal vigor. We've sustained my first year in office. We created the Personal Readiness Task Force, so studies weren't just shelfware. They were actually things that we would action. We have maintained that into the 4th year of this tenure to action the URM study in specifics. We have a cross-functional team that has broken this down into chunks, and we're going to go down every specific recommendation and try to drive them over the goal line. We've invested, sir, from about $600,000 in D&I initiatives back around 2017 to more than $12 million right now, and we are serious about this. It kind of reflects back to both the masteries of my statement about being a nation that's served by a Coast Guard that's more representative of the Americans we serve. There's no military service that interacts more with the public than the United States Coast Guard, sir. So we got to get this right, and it has absolutely mine and the entire top leadership team's top attention.
And I'm assuming that the commitment extends the Coast Guard Academy and outreach and recruitment, as well as working toward inclusion.
Senator, absolutely. Our academy, the class of 2025 is 40% women. It's 38% underrepresented minorities. We have the highest both women and underrepresented of any of the service academies, but we were driving towards 50% that reflects for women. We're driving towards, we're still, in terms of African Americans in the service, we're about 5.5%, 6%, and we need to drive that closer to the 11 or 12% that represents society with a propensity to serve. So we're trying to recruit in different places. We've stood up 5 new recruiting officer sites to get to places we haven't successfully recruited, and we absolutely want to make, our academy that really, not just the service academy part, but every Coast Guard officer that commissions goes through New London. So that is a touch point. We want to make sure they are educated leaders. They have an open mind. They leave the fleet with no biases, no unconscious biases, and they want to be tremendous contributors to our United States Coast Guard going forward.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Next, I call on the ranking member of the full committee, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do appreciate our two witnesses being here. And thank you, Admiral Schultz, for pointing out that the Coast Guard Academy actually leads all of the federally sanctioned service academies in terms of diversity. You're not where you'd like to be, but in terms of the academy, you're further down the road toward accomplishment than everyone else. The diversity has not translated to the enlisted ranks. I've got a bill that would require the Coast Guard to partner with institutions such as the historically black community colleges and universities in order to increase diversity in the enlisted ranks. What do you two gentlemen think about that? And was that one of the recommendations that the RAND study mentioned? So we'll start with you, Master Chief.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. So we are grateful for all the support we get from the committee. You gave us the opportunity to bring on some new recruiters this year. And we're expanding our junior ROTC programs. We had one junior ROTC program, and the Commandant and through his support and through the support for the resources we've gotten, we've been able to expand that junior ROTC. So I think we're going to do a better job of getting into these high schools to start to tell the Coast Guard story. I visited with some of our members on the Hill, and they said, you know, the Coast Guard's the best kept secret. We don't want to be the best kept secret. We want to be well known. So we're doing a lot better job of getting out and telling our story, and so we're grateful for this. You know, community colleges are a great place to attract folks who perhaps could use the GI Bill, could use some help from the GI Bill. So we're grateful for any support that we can get, and you're giving us the ability to also get more folks through Cape May. This fiscal year 22 budget looks really good for being able to build out our training center, our boot camp in Cape May, so we can get more folks through. That's going to be critically important, and then the training centers as well. You've also given us opportunity to improve quality of life at the small boat stations, which helps us to retain folks that we do recruit. So I'm grateful, and you know, I wish I had another year of service, because I think we're going to make it. We're going to eat into this pretty good, and we're going to make a difference here soon. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're enthusiastic about junior ROTC. I'm an ROTC graduate myself, nice. But actually, the RAND Corporation has also done extensive studies about the effectiveness of JROTC. And it's way more than a recruitment tool for the military or for the Coast Guard. It is a way for a subset of a high school to do better than their peers, to graduate at a higher rate, to make better grades, and to do better upon graduation. So to hear JROTC be mentioned in a favorable light is absolutely music to my ears. And I can tell you, Senator Sullivan and I and others on the Armed Services Committee have done our best to help to fund more opportunities. And I've never found a superintendent or a principal that did not respond favorably when I asked how JROTC is at their school, or would you like one at your school? They all say yes. So that's encouraging. Rather than shift to you on that question, Admiral Schultz, let me just ask. Senator Sullivan believes in showing off the Coast Guard in Alaska, and the best way to to understand something is to go there. And he took me all over the place from north to south and out on the Aleutian. We went to Kodiak, and there was a refueling pier there used by the Coast Guard to refuel cutters. On more than one occasion, the Coast Guard has had to stop using the pier for fueling operations because high winds put excessive strain on its structural integrity. Is this an isolated example, Admiral, or what other sorts of operational safety hazards do they face? And what in the world are we going to do about this $3 billion backlog?
Yes, sir, Senator, thank you.
You've got 2 seconds.
I got 2 seconds. Yes, sir, we're going to do something about it. So we got about $2 billion of infrastructure backlog, about $1 billion.
$2 billion.
$2 billion of infrastructure, about $1 billion of maintenance and other things. That pier in Kodiak absolutely needs to be replaced at some point. The unfunded priority list has been a very effective tool that members of the Senate on both sides of the aisle have championed topics for us, so it's allowed us to get after some of those things. So we do have infrastructure challenge across the Coast Guard. What we're going to continue to do is voice into that. That's part of the readiness narrative. These are things that detract from the Coast Guard's ability to provide the nation with the service we need to get after all the challenges America wants its Coast Guard to do. So you have my commitment, the Majesty's commitment, to put our voices against this, take folks out from the Hill that want to see things from the administration, show them the challenges, show them what we can do. You know, we can respond to a Hurricane Harvey from a new facility in Houston, Galveston, when we have a new facility, and go rescue 11,000 people off streets of America when there's 52 inches of rain in 36 hours. Had we done that from an old facility, that would have been a very different set of circumstances. So modern facilities, modern piers, continued support from the administration and the Senate allows us to buy down some of that challenge.
An infrastructure bill that addressed this type of hard asset construction would be a godsend.
Sir, your legislation, sure, that gets after, support for the Coast Guard Yard, which does some really niche stuff, and I know you just visited. You get after some things about recruiting and a more inclusive, diverse Coast Guard. You talk about, the pay in a potential shutdown and the gap in appropriations. That legislation's very helpful, sir. And if I could take 10 seconds, the junior ROTC program, Jim Clyburn, very helpful. We got a new program in North Charleston, not his district, but North Charleston. We got one in Pinellas County, Florida. That's 2 on top of 1 in Miami and out in Camden County, North Carolina. But I think for buying up a couple salaries, maybe some former Coast Guards, and we can touch schools and STEM communities, and I see 4 becoming 8, becoming 30 in the coming year. So we're very excited about the new authorities to the junior ROTC. So I think it's going to get us places we haven't been before.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That was more than 2 seconds. I apologize, sir.
Good answer.
Next, I'll call on the chair of the full committee, Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Chair Baldwin, and thanks so much for holding this important hearing. Admiral Schultz, you probably couldn't get a more dedicated group of people on this side of the dais to the missions of the Coast Guard. We're all big supporters of making sure the Coast Guard has the resources that it needs, so it's good to see you and Master Chief Vander Hayden here, so thank you. I want to follow up on my colleague, Senator Blumenthal's questions about sexual assault. You know that I sent you this letter just recently about sexual assault. I want to say we've worked together on childcare in the Coast Guard and appreciate those efforts. Expanding health care in the Coast Guard, definitely appreciate those efforts. We've worked with you on paid family leave. Very proud that the Coast Guard was leading the way on getting paid family leave. I think you recognize that 40% of your workforce being women, that you had to have better policies, and so we appreciate working there. I think the issue of sexual assault is the next area where you need to spend some time, because I'm not sure with this. I would also say it's also clear the Coast Guard has many, many missions, and very hard to meet all those missions. But this one, this oversight of other vessels, and those vessels and what they are doing, particularly when we're putting young women on those vessels to do research. So but basically they're students, and now they're on these vessels. And so I just want to go back to this issue of the accounts we've had by Kings Point midshipmen and others about, questions about the Coast Guard, the investigations of U.S. flagged ships. So I know there's fines. You can issue fines. But I want to know whether you believe that we need a more aggressive enforcement plan of sexual assaults at sea and the actions that should be taken when we hear of or find incidents.
Well, Madam Chair, I absolutely think it's aberrant behavior, and we absolutely need to be aggressive. I think what we have had is we've had 10 cases less than 10. We've had 5 cases over 10 years, so there's not a lot of cases making it to that. We have investigated and referred each and every one of those to the U.S. Attorney in the appropriate district. We had one case where we had a shipping line that wasn't responsive, and we went after them through administrative suspension and revocation process, finding process. So I'd say, I suspect there's probably more activities that are going undetected out there, unreported. So I think we need to
Exactly.
we need to get out of it. We have got a CJIS tips line, and we're trying to push it out there. We've gone to the various maritime journals and other things to say, here's who you contact. So I think there's an education piece. You have absolutely my commitment. We are doing a lot of things. I'd love to come back and brief the committee on some of the things our Coast Guard Investigative Service is doing. And then there's some challenges with evidence collection. These big ships, ply the oceans 320 days a year, rotational crews. We find out after the fact. So getting evidentiary matters, we're trying to model some things. We do some of this telephonically, tele-wise, but you need to have medical experts. So we're looking at different ways to be able to gather evidence, but there's some room for definite improvement.
Well, I definitely
there.
think investigation at sea is very hard.
Yes, ma'am.
And the reason why, when you say you think there's probably more there that's undetected, I'm saying exactly because we're hearing from them
Yes, ma'am. You have my commitment.
as whistleblowers. So to me, when I look at the fine of $5,000 to $10,000, certainly not enough. I think we're going to have to look at increasing that. But as we diversify this workforce, we have to make sure that that women are safe at sea and that we have the resources and infrastructure to oversee the operations of these ships that you have oversight over, and make sure that we have a very aggressive action plan to get the behavior that we want from those parent companies. The parent companies have to take this very seriously.
Yes, ma'am. And they have to
And-
take it seriously when they feel like there's accountability.
Yes, we're in agreement on that. Okay, so I'll look forward to an action plan and a formal response to our letter. On the issue of the California oil spill and this issue of congestion, it seems to me that a new phenomenon has happened, right? We're parking a lot of ships, right? Because of whatever you want, lots of different reasons related to the pandemic. And so there's been as many as 100 vessels drifting off the coast, the West Coast, resulting in anchorage areas. So I know that I was surprised to learn that the anchorage directly adjacent to the pipeline that we were talking about in the California oil spill had a categorical exclusion under the National Environmental Protection Act, which meant it didn't go through full environmental review. So I'm asking this question. We're parking lots of ships. Do we know where we're parking them? And are we parking them too close to these pipelines? And I would hope that you would not, I'm not trying to catch you off guard today. I know you have new informal drift zones to help accommodate more vessels, and I know you're looking at the impacts of this. In our state, we have anchorages throughout Puget Sound. Holmes Harbor is being used for the first time in over a decade, which is causing air pollution and noise pollution to communities. And so I just want to know what you are doing to help manage the situation and help protect wildlife in these areas.
Yes, Madam Chair, you're absolutely correct. There is challenges with the volume and the backlogs, and some of that is, that's obviously not in the Coast Guard lanes attenuate, but managing the risk that goes with shipping, that's squarely in our wheelhouse. So we are looking at, obviously the case in LA, the oil spill, we are investigating that, and we are investigating, causative factors. Was there a ship involved? We made one shipping company and owners and operators a party to the investigation here in recent days, but that's just the start of the conversation. We need to look at that. When you declare an anchorage, that is Coast Guard Captain of the Port functionality, working with the state, working with the localities. We partner through the Harbor Safety Committee. We try to make informed decisions. The anchorage in question here with this pipeline was an anchorage created back in 2006, and it was created because of the size of larger vessels. These vessels now 1,000+ feet. They carry 13,000 up to 18,000, soon 20,000 TEU containers on the back. So,
But we didn't, I don't know that we did the environmental review then, because we didn't know that this was going to.
What's I'm saying, ma'am, I think it's the complexity and the changing landscape. So we need to use this case, I think, to really dive in. I think all our captain of the ports are managing this to a different degree in different places. And we've got to make sure, we're at the level of safety we think we are, and we need to look at make sure we look go back and look where any of these pipelines are, proximity. I think there's some learning. I can't attribute, this oil spill yet to a ship situation, but it's a plausible scenario. We have a vessel that we've, made a party to that because it could be the case, and we got a lot more investigative work to do, so I don't want to get ahead of the headlights on that. But we are absolutely looking at this, Senator, and you have my commitment to make sure we want to keep the environment safe. We want to make sure there's not collisions at sea, ships drifting offshore. That creates different problems. We got whales, right whales, in your area off of LA. We changed the shipping channels when I was the 11th District Commander out there to accommodate the whales in safer fashion and found some mutually compatible places. But this is challenging us in different ways. Bigger ships, more ships, just-in-time delivery systems. So a ship doesn't want to sit at shore, maybe miss its turn to the dock. So there's a lot of moving parts in there that we've got to work with the other stakeholders on and understand and make sure we understand, that we're doing this as responsibly as a nation as we can. And there's a Coast Guard piece of that from a safety perspective, absolutely.
Well, I think you need to think about whether we do an environmental impact or the impact on the wildlife as to these anchorages.
I'm not sure on the abbreviating that, so I will go back and get smarter
thank
on that. I don't have an answer for that, ma'am, but I'll look at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next, Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First of all, gentlemen, thank you for your service. Admiral Schultz, on August 23rd, the FDA approved the Comirnaty vaccine, but they extended the authorization under emergency use for the other Pfizer vaccine. On August 24th, Secretary Austin issued his memorandum on the mandate for the military. I think later that month, the Coast Guard said you would follow that basic procedure. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator. We are mandating the vaccine, as is the Department of Defense, correct?
Now, the other branches have listed their deadlines. You're a component of DHS. The rest of the federal government the deadline for the mandate is November 22nd. Is that your deadline as well?
Senator, I have not publicly stated a deadline yet. I guess by default, as a member of DHS, it wouldn't be disingenuous to say the 22nd, but I have actually sort of removed that decision space to sort of see how things unfold. And we're driving in the right direction towards compliance, but I have not put out a firm date to our Coast Guard men and women yet.
Okay. In the August 24th letter from Secretary Austin, he said the mandatory vaccination against COVID-19 will use only COVID-19 vaccines that receive full licensure, in other words, full FDA approval, in accordance with FDA-approved labeling and guidance. At the same time, when the FDA, on the 23rd, when they did that distinct approval for Comirnaty, or however you pronounce that, and the extent of the emergency use, the FDA said there's not sufficient approved vaccine available for distribution of the Comirnaty. So there just wasn't. As a matter of fact, on September 13th, NIH published a statement that Pfizer does not plan to produce any product with the new version over the next few months, while the EUA authorized product is still available. So it doesn't sound like Comirnaty is going to be available. I've written to the Secretary, I've written to the President, whether that's going to be the case. Are we going to mandate and force members of the military to take a vaccine that is not fully FDA approved? So have you secured enough product of the Comirnaty to utilize in the forced vaccination program?
Senator, I believe the answer to that is yes. I believe we have sufficient holdings of the approved vaccination, but I will double check on that and circle back to that, but I believe that is the case.
Okay, I would definitely appreciate that. A quick follow-up, what are you going to do with the members of the Coast Guard that refuse to take the vaccine? What was going to be your procedure?
Senator, what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to drive folks towards understanding the benefits of the vaccine, the risks to force from a readiness standpoint, education. We've had folks come in. There's a lot of information out there. Folks come in, they want to see the vials, and we bring them into the clinic. We show them the vials. We make the chief medical officer or her staff available to answer questions. And I would hope we're about 92.5% first shot, so about 90% for total vaccination across the active force. Little lower percentage in the reserves, but some challenges as reservists are spread all over and disaggregated. So we're going to continue to educate. We have put some mitigating strategies in place, so if you are not vaccinated, you may not attend an advanced training course or curriculum until you get vaccinated. In terms of, discharge and those things, on the active side, somewhere just south of 3,000 unvaccinated folks. There's some portion of that are of religious accommodations. We We are still processing those. Everyone will go through a chaplain. We have not acted on them yet. There are medical waivers in there. So we're trying to really get our arms around what those specific numbers are, and then the course is forward. We have not made any decisions regarding administrative decisions, but we're looking like the other services at those actions.
Thank you. And we are getting an awful lot of letters and emails from people pretty concerned about this mandate, so I hope you take that in consideration. Let's shift gears in terms of the southern border. I know that the Coast Guard works within DHS, primarily drug interdiction. Let me first ask you, because I've asked this question of Secretary Mayorkas, do you believe the southern border is secure?
Senator, you asked me that question through the specific lens of narcotics smuggling or just writ large?
Just secure. When we're encountering 200,000 people per month, over 6,700 per day, that is overwhelming the systems. It's opening up channels for drug trafficking, other human trafficking. I mean, do you believe the border is secure?
Senator, I would say
do you believe the border is closed? I think that's the terminology the Secretary uses.
Senator, I think it would be disingenuous for me to say the border is closed. I mean, we clearly have seen numbers that come in, unaccompanied children, some ties to families. So we know there's numbers, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands coming in on a monthly basis. So I would not say the border is closed. In terms of the decision about what type of nation and border policy we want, that's above my pay grade. I would say when there's more traffic at the border and the Border Patrol is stretched thinner, is there a higher propensity for illicit activity occurred at the border? I think the answer to that is clearly yes.
So my concern is how we're utilizing personnel between the Coast Guard, between DHS. DHS also helps in drug interdiction. If they had to pull those people off of drug interdiction, has the Coast Guard provide personnel to just deal with the enormous flow? I know there was one report where Coast Guard was helping evacuate to airlift some of the illegal immigrants off the border into the interiors. So could you just comment on in terms of what the personnel movement has been?
Senator, I would say when you're dealing with, a couple 100,000 people a month at the border, it is an all hands on deck evolution. So it's a capacity challenge. We assisted the Department of Homeland Security for about 6 days. We moved, I believe the number was up around 1,390 folks from Del Rio to other processing sites in Texas. We had 29 flights. We had 3 C-130 aircraft and 1 C-27 fixed wing that were supporting that mission. So it was less than probably 3 dozen Coast Guard men and women to support that. But that was a department challenge, and the Coast Guard clearly, part of the DHS team, stepped in to help on that. Is that a place where I see Coast Guardsmen being involved all the time? No, but that was a mission that I felt we brought some unique capabilities to. In terms of other challenges at the border, I've had medical people down there supporting Border Patrol so that frontline Border Patrol men and women could get to the border. We've had some general purpose coasties there to allow frontline border people to get to the border. So I think there is a ongoing role. It's sort of episodic right now for the Coast Guard.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I'm out of time.
Next, Senator Duckworth will be participating remotely, as I understand it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to join you today, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here. And gentlemen, if you're looking for places to put JROTC programs, I invite you to come to Illinois and all of my communities of color along the Mississippi River, not the least of which Cairo, Illinois, was a major port, Union port for Union logistics during the Civil War. Another community of color that is struggling and sure could use a JROTC program for the young people growing up there. But I would like my first question to be an international one. Like a number of my colleagues on the Commerce Committee, I also serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I'm particularly interested in the Coast Guard's engagement with our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific region through joint operations, exercises, and training. The Coast Guard has, for example, sent 2 cutters, given 2 cutters to Vietnam, another one to Sri Lanka, and many other nations around the world, but also in Indo-Pacific. Admiral Schultz, can you explain how the Coast Guard's international partnerships strengthen our nation's readiness to engage in great power competition in the Indo-Pacific region?
Senator, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Thank you for your service. We recently, the CNO, Admiral Gilday, myself, and General Berger, back in the late part of calendar 20, put out Tri-Services Maritime Advantage at Sea, and it tied together about the unique complementary roles of how we bring all domain capability, naval capability against challenges around the globe. And a big part of that was oriented around the Indo-Pacific part of the world. What we have, ma'am, is we support the Indo-Pacific 7th Fleet Commander with national security cutters. On occasion, we have the Coast Guard Cutter Monroe that's just wrapping up a multi-month deployment there. She exercised a MOA with Taiwan that was penned here in late March. She exercised with the Japanese Coast Guard and Japanese Self-Defense Naval Forces. We worked with the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency, the Indonesian Bakamla is their equivalent of the Coast Guard. So we can do a lot of capacity building. We have Coast Guard liaisons, attaches in that part of the world. We have a new attache going to Singapore next summer. We partnered also with the Monroe, with the Australians, and multi-day, multi-Australian naval forces working with our Coast Guardsmen. I broaden that out a little bit, and I look across the Indo-Pacific region outside of South China Sea, East China Sea. We put three new fast response cutters, 154-foot patrol craft in Guam, and I was out there for the commissioning. They are stretching about 10,000 miles of nautical mile range, sometime teamed up with the Coast Guard buoy tender, another platform that extends their ability for logistics support. And they were just doing some work out there in the region with a nation. This nation had a Australian-provided patrol boat that went aground, so we helped them cover down on some of their fisheries enforcement efforts here in that gap. So I think you're going to see an increasing demand. So I know you're seeing an increasing demand signal from my DoD shipmates, colleagues at Indo-Pacific for more high-end national security cutters to operate in the region, more extended operations across the vast Oceania region where there's a great competition for, checkbook diplomacy of a China versus human-to-human interaction, sort of beholden to the like-minded partners' shared view of free and open oceans. I think that's where the Coast Guard brings some unique capability. China uses its Coast Guard and its maritime militia as their actioning arm. Then they sit back and say, hey, we're not militarizing the Indo-Pacific. It's United States Navy. It's it's other allied partners. I would tell you, yeah, you use your Coast Guard, and who better to call out those behaviors by their Coast Guard than the United States Coast Guard that I think is a recognized, global force of good here.
Thank you, Admiral. And if you could provide me an answer within written format, because we're running out of time here, could you give us a potential updates to the fleet mix and what specific actions to that fleet mix would you recommend Congress consider as we seek to empower the Coast Guard to expand its presence and operations in an Indo-Pacific region? I do want to touch on affordable housing for Coasties. I am a Coasties family. Now, my brother was a Coast Guardsman of color, Asian American, who dropped out of the Coast Guard, who wanted to be a lifer but left, and because he just couldn't sustain the lifestyle, and he needed to go make some more money, and so I'm concerned that it is very difficult for service members in the Coast Guard to be able to rent affordable housing in areas where families must compete with tourism and growth of online homestay services such as Airbnbs. And so I would like to have a conversation with you about that in terms of what we can do to help you with this matter. And then finally, I do want to close by saying that I've received feedback that the lack of basic support, such as lactation accommodations for female Coasties, contributes to a sense that female service members must choose between serving in the Coast Guard and starting a family. And I'll submit those questions for the record to address that issue. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Good to see you, ma'am, and we'll circle back with your staff and try to address all those issues you raised here.
Thank you.
We are going to start a second round of questioning, and in honor of the Democrat-Republican tradition, I'm going to call on my ranking member first.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, and gentlemen. Let me dig into a little bit more. I talked about the icebreakers, the polar security cutters, and Admiral, you and I have talked about what is a concern of mine, I think it's a concern of yours, which is a gap in coverage. Given the fire aboard the Healy, that left our country with one capable icebreaker. You and I talked about this idea of, on the unfunded priority list, for an immediate lease of the potential for a capable vessel. There was some progress being made. I think it's kind of been stalled. And then more specifically or longer term, as we build these polar security cutters, my own view, which I know you are very familiar with, is that at least one of these should be actually home ported in the Arctic. We've authorized 6. We're building 3 now. There has been some discussion recently of home porting perhaps the Healy in Alaska. Can you touch on both of these short-term leasing issues, if we've made progress on those, and then the longer-term basing issues? Again, I just think it makes complete strategic sense to have icebreakers home ported in the place that they're going to be operationally most relevant, which is the Arctic, which is Alaska. I know that in the lower 48, it can take up to 2 weeks. It's certainly, I know from your perspective, you want to put those where there are currently some, and I think that makes sense. But if we have more with the option of the Healy, I'd like your views on both of those topics.
Yeah, Ranking Member Sullivan, thank you for the question, and the questions plural. I would tell you, in terms of the conversation about leasing and available icebreakers, so those conversations continue. I think we have pivoted the conversation from potentially a lease to maybe a purchase scenario, and we remain engaged with the administration and national security staff.
And do we need to do anything here, we, the Congress? Again, I think you're seeing here Coast Guard assets, Coast Guard infrastructure, Coast Guard icebreakers, whether in the Arctic or on the Great Lakes, is really bipartisan. So, you know, if you have asks that can help us accelerate that, please let the Congress know. Is there things that we?
So Senator, I'll tell you that I think the conversation, the energizing the conversation about the geostrategic importance of the high latitudes, keep that voice, keep amplifying that. I think it's important. I do not have the wherewithal in my budget as we're building, 5 different capital ship programs right now, from NSCs, OPCs, fast response cutters, waterways commerce cutters, and polar security cutters, to lift an icebreaker purchase and or lease. There was talk about potentially the administration lifting that. That piece seems to be on a little less firm ground right now. So I think how we would fund that, I think we included a wedge on the unfunded priority list to the tune of $150 million. That would procure the vessel or maybe start initial lease. I think in my mind that the smart way forward in terms of return on taxpayers' investments is probably to procure that vessel, keep it in our inventory. But we would need sustainment funding on that, so there's clearly a piece for the Congress. In terms of the broader conversation, sir, about icebreaking capacity, future home ports, I owe you some feedback from our Alaska home porting study. That is in final iterative review inside the headquarters. Hasn't made it up to the front office yet. I believe it's in cutter forces, having coming out of the engineers and things on that. So I believe we'll be able to give you some feedback on that. So we have talked about different options in the Arctic. I have consistently talked about a 6-3-1 strategy. That one was get it going. So PSC number 1 under construction. A lot of goodness there. We talked about a minimum of 3 heavies. That's been the conversation. You know the story there. And then there's a conversation about what is beyond that. We did some upgraded homework after the high latitude, the HIMARS studies. Arguably, you can make a good business case for 6 and 9 breakers for the nation. Right now, I focus
Well, look,
on
again, Russia has
ones.
50, right?
Yes, sir.
And 54 is a number I know, and many of which are nuclear, some of which are heavily weaponized. So we're way behind.
So I think there's conversation about what is in the beyond 3, and then what is in the beyond 3, where do you cite those? When we look at Alaska, we've had the conversation, you and I, about potentialities in Kodiak. Kodiak, you have some challenges with the water depth, you have some challenges with limited pier space, but was there a conversation about medium breakers, different water depths? Might be a different conversation there. You've talked about Seward before. I think there's some conversation there, something like the Healy, the Healy, that's 145 crew members. You've been very generous to committee here on support for housing in Kodiak, and we're 3 phases, sort of through the wire on funding with the committee support. We'd have to have a similar kind of lift, I think, to do something in Seward in terms of the soft support. Then we look at the maintenance support for a ship like that. The Healy is now coming in, approaches 25-year mark here in the not-too-distant future. I think there's conversations, sir, that align with your interests when we broaden that conversation beyond the 3 polar security cutters, and we're committed to continue the dialogue and keep an open mind on that.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Master Chief Vanderheyden, I recently traveled to the Coast Guard station in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and met with the crew on the Coast Guard icebreaker Mobile Bay. And it was very clear to me that ice breaking and buoy tending are both very hard work. While that mission will never be easy, it seems to me that there are opportunities to make life a little bit easier for Coast Guard members and their families. So I'm going to touch upon the housing issue as well as a few others. In addition to career development and training, I heard from Coast Guard members and their families stationed in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, about the challenges with their aging facilities, which I will add were originally built in 1886 when it was still called the U.S. Life-Saving Service. And also the lack of childcare availability and the difficulty in finding housing. One Coast Guard member who was recently assigned there said that she camped for most of the summer with her children. They enjoyed it, but they won't in the Wisconsin winters. And a place like Sturgeon Bay, where the existing housing stock is quite expensive because it's also co-located with an area of lots of tourism, that people enjoy that area. So this is an issue Coast Guard-wide, not just on the Great Lakes. I'm sure it's apparent in Alaska and on both salty coasts. So I am working hard to secure funding to rebuild stations like Sturgeon Bay in the reconciliation package. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the basic allowance for housing. The basic allowance for housing, BAH, is often not sufficient to cover the costs of rent or a mortgage. And it seems to me that that model was really designed for the Department of Defense and isn't working for many Coast Guard families. So have you observed members struggling to afford housing? And what do you think can be done to address these challenges?
Well, thank you very much. Master Chief Olson said he really enjoyed your visit. He got a lot out of that, and the crew really appreciated your attention to them. So, and then the Mobile Bay, same thing. I was kind of on your heels a little bit for that trip, and they loved it. I tell you, that station is just amazing. An old life-saving station. They've really kept it together with bubble gum and baling wire and done a magnificent job of continuing to do great operations out of there. And they're grateful for your support, and they are getting some funding for that to update that station. The DOD funds BAH at 95% of the actual costs for the military housing area. And DOD is really the one that can move the needle in big where there's a lot of DOD. If they're not collecting data where you are, you're not gonna enjoy the. It's not gonna work for you. So we're doing a really fine look at the military housing area and our policy of how we draw our military housing areas, and then where we can, if there's a neighborhood that's potentially not where we would want our folks to live, that we can exclude. We're looking at exclusion zones. You know, of all the bad things of COVID, this was one that really caused us to stop and take a look and say, wow, housing costs really went up. So our housing office is been thoroughly examining every military housing area. Now, the interesting thing about the Great Lakes is there's something called the Cost County area, and then some of them are the BAH is not derived by a military housing area, but by the county, and it has to do with other statistics that I'm not exactly sure how that's done, but we are really looking at every housing. I met with my service senior enlisted, and they are committed. The DOD personnel readiness is committed to really fine-tuning their data collection, and they've increased the BAH in 56 military housing areas preliminarily this year on a temporary basis. They're optimistic that the data is going to show that we need to raise the BAH. Now, sometimes I can give you all the money in the world you want, but if there's no inventory, it's not going to help you. It sounds like in Sturgeon Bay that was the case, that it didn't matter what your housing allowance was. If we need to work on, to work on perhaps government leases. We need to work on perhaps even working with community leaders. In Seward, I visited Seward, and Governor Dunleavy is working with some of the builders to say, hey, we've got Coasties here. They need to live here. They're going to be here for a long time. why don't we build some apartment complexes and some condos and things like that so that, and we can almost guarantee that they're going to occupy those and it's going to be a win-win for everybody. So we're working with local elected leaders to try to increase the inventory in these areas. And so we're committed to trying to help our people and to really, Admiral Schultz directed our budget folks to divert some funds into our housing office so that we can get after some more government leases. So I appreciate your support, and we are looking at every option to try to help our folks.
Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair. And I do think between the chair and myself, you'll see really strong support on the housing issue. I just wanted to end this hearing, and thanks again for the testimony. Two quick questions. Admiral, one for you. As you know, we recently passed legislation making it easier for vessels home ported in Alaska and other places to contract repairs in the local shipyards. That's an issue for us. I'm pretty sure it's an issue in Wisconsin as well. I recently had a meeting with some of your senior staff voicing concerns over the lack of utilization of that new legislation. It was a constructive meeting, so I don't want to be complaining here. The vision, I think and you and I have talked about it, which makes sense all around for the local economies, for the Coast Guard, because you would save money as opposed to sending ships for heavy maintenance down to Alameda and other places. You could do it locally. The crews would be closer to their home ports. Do you have any updates on that, or just, I know that it's a priority. We got the law change, working with your staff to help us on the language. But any updates on that, sir, that you want to?
Yes, sir, Senator. I know you and I have worked in this for a long time. We got to the place with bigger times, and then some of the timing with when they want to do the fishing fleet, the timing of us, the sort of us operating on a one-year budget cycle. And really, we've sort of seeded the first quarter of the fiscal year, almost the first and second quarter sometime because of the uncertainty with annual appropriation. So we try to pack a lot of work into almost the last 7 months of the year, the second half 7 months. We've got some 2-year ability for Forex maintenance funds. That was very helpful, and we got to continue to renew that. So we're looking at 4 potential ship contracts that could be done in Alaska in 22. So I think there's some opportunities for us here to continue to work. We will make sure your staff is up to speed. I think there's a possibility that we could steer some of that work to a shipyard up there. There's obviously just the timing of when our ships come up and the budgets. There's the availability of the shipyard to do that kind of work. But we understand the intent. I think we were committed to trying to still get a successful outcome here where, work that, and it's from our crews, it's you send men and women to sea for some portion of 185 days a year, being down somewhere in the lower 48 just is a tougher challenge in terms of quality of life and family, the separation. Generally, summer months, kids are out of school, you're sailing a lot. So there are definite upsides for us when we can do the work closer to home. So we have some
the admirals that I've talked to in District 17 think it's a cost saver, a pretty significant cost saver for the Coast Guard too. So I look forward to working with you, continuing to work with you on that. I think we've made good progress. And Master Chief, I was glad to hear you mention in your opening testimony, morale is high. That was going to be one of my questions, given how close you are to it. And that you strategically visited Wisconsin and Alaska before this hearing. That's really good staff work, whoever made that happen, so well done. But my question for you is just a general one. In your travels, both to Wisconsin, Alaska, and beyond, you're the senior enlisted for the whole service. What were you hearing that were good things? You say morale's high. Why is it high? Well, I love hearing that. What are the problematic issues? What are the issues that are keeping the Coast Guard men and women up at night and their families? We want to make sure we're taking care of the families as well.
Well, thank you both. Morale's high because people love what they do. They have a very rewarding mission. We empower our junior members to make a difference. As I go around, and you probably, when they put people, it's the young folks that are the ones that are being recognized because they're just doing tremendous work. So I think there's a sense of pride and the knowledge that they're making a difference the minute they show up at their units. So that's the good thing. The challenge, so our computer systems and some of our technology we haven't been able to make investments in. our servers are max capacity, and we're eating in. We're doing what's called the tech revolution, thanks to support from this committee and support from the Congress. We're able to leverage technology. We really, it's kind of funny that they don't have any problem communicating on their personal devices, but when they try to log on to some of our Coast Guard workstation, our software programs and things like that, they're just difficult, and they're difficult in Wisconsin and Alaska, particularly because the bandwidth challenges we have and things like that. So we're really making a significant and a committed investment to improving our C5I, our computer systems, trying to increase the efficiency so that, like, if our folks go out and do a law enforcement boarding, they'll have mobility where they can do they're not just handwriting things anymore. They're actually typing into a tablet and then coming back and uploading that information instead of having to write everything out, then come back. And so we're trying to leverage technology. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do to help our people right now, because they know it's out there. We just haven't been able to get it to them, but thanks to you, we will.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Senator, I think it's those enabling things. One second.
Please,
yeah.
you go
I think
right
those
ahead.
enablers, the housing, the childcare, we have 10 CDCs across the Coast Guard. Thinking about infrastructure, we'd like to have more. And, we're looking as we go big in Seattle and Charleston that we clearly want to upgrade facilities, build new facilities. I think in the interim periods, we've gone from, up about $13 million, if you include where we hope to come out of the 22 budget for child care subsidies. That allows us to drive down some of those immediate needs. But there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So the housing costs have never been more challenging. Some of the temporal relief here through the end of December, you got to go in and make the business case, you have to show your costs. Those are on people's minds. And then we're in an environment now as of 1 January 2018 in this new blended retirement. Maybe not a 2021 conversation, but you sort of fast forward a young Coast Guard man or woman or dual military couple, they're paying themselves first. They get to that 12-year point, and the last move they had was very difficult, a lot of out-of-pocket expenses. They're having a hard time finding childcare, and someone looks and says, hey, boy, you're kind of a skilled American.
Yeah.
Why don't you come join my team? I see what Vander Hayden and Schultz are paying. They go right down the table years, and they offer you a $30,000 increase in pay. You can stay put, some childcare. It's a competitive place. So I think it's all those enabling functionalities where the Congress can continue to help. People love their work. People love being on the Coast Guard team. We got challenges, and we're working those challenges. But I think it's those enabling things that allow us to compete and keep the Coast Guard an attractive place to work. It's going to get increasingly more important. I say to folks, the biggest challenge facing our organization for the 27th, 28th, 29th Commandant is going to be talent management and human capital retention.
Well, keep us posted on those, legislatively or, just administratively. I remember a couple of years back, the DOD came out with that policy that was putting the Coast Guard men and women in the back of the line on the CDCs. I was like, are you kidding me? So those are the kind of things, keep us posted on. We want to make sure we're.
And our DOD partners have been great partners, so we're working, I think, better than we ever have before, but thanks for helping us
Yeah,
fix that, too.
absolutely.
Thank you.
I understand Senator Blackburn has joined us remotely. Let me see if that is still the case.
Yes, I am here.
All right.
Thank you very
Senator
much.
Blackburn, you're
Yes.
recognized.
Well, and thank you all for the hearing. I have just really one thing, Admiral Schultz, coming to you. We have just recently celebrated the commissioning of the Coast Guard station in Memphis, and we are certainly looking forward to that and would love to hear from you on the record. I mean, people in Memphis are really thankful and excited about this, and I think it speaks to the growth of the mission of the Coast Guard. But for the record, I would love to hear from you what your expectation is for that facility and for their ability to serve the Coast Guard in the future.
Well, Senator, good to see you, and thanks for your continued support of the men and women in uniform and all the armed services. Man, we turned the operations, the boat operations there, sort of from a boathouse into a station. And the station means you have an officer in charge, and that's a position that goes with broader authorities, and I think that allows us to better address the maritime challenges, whether that's search and rescue on the riverway system there, whether that's responding to security, hazardous material transits, waterways challenges. There's always different things that impact the waterways in the Heartland region there. I think actually designating that as a station and giving you know, it's a first-class petty officer that leads that station. Giving him or her the requisite authorities is a better operation than we had there before. It was sort of an amalgamation of sort of a boat forces operation with less clear construct on what authorities they had to do the missions. I think it's cleaner for the partners in the region, and I think we'll be a more effective Coast Guard there because of this change, ma'am.
Well, I think there are plenty of people at the Port of Memphis that agree with you, and they're just really very hopeful for what having this new station is going to bring their way. There's just one other question that I've had as I've listened to some of Senator Sullivan's questions and the conversation that has ensued. And this would be for either of you. As we look at great power competition and as we look at how we address the Arctic governance, is there any aspect or any area where our interests align with China and Russia?
Senator, I would say, you know, the senator kind of chuckled and he talked about self-declared near-Arctic nation when he mentioned China's interest in the Arctic. You know, China had one research vessel they got from the Ukrainians, the Snow Dragon 1. They built the second one in China. They're now building, you know, building heavy breakers, whatever that means. They've even entertained the conversation of nuclear breakers. I think we have to pay attention to what is China's interest in the Arctic. We've seen them up off the Pacific or Alaska Arctic for 8 of the last 12 or so years. And I think, you know, arguably they're down there surveying where we have undersea cables, and they're up there paying attention to us sighting 5th-generation fighters in places like Eielson. They're clearly interested in the $1 trillion of minerals that are on the ocean's floor. It's shallow water access to energy, 15% of the untapped petroleum in the world, a third of the LNG. So I think we have to be circumspect about China's interest there. I look at China over in the Northern Sea Route and the partnership with Russia on the Yamal energy, and you look at all the economic benefit that Russia is deriving. About 25% of their GDP derives from Arctic activities. They're militarizing the Arctic, as the Senator Sullivan spoke about earlier. With Russia, Russia chairs the Arctic Council right now. They took over in the spring. They also chair the Arctic Coast Guard Forum. So things like sailing the Healy through the Northwest Pass is a demonstration of our ability to partner with Canada. We pushed it over to Greenland. We collaborate with the Danes, the French. I met last night with the Danes and Norwegians earlier in the day. So we are absolutely, you know, partnering with the other 7 Arctic nations, including Russia. We need to have a constructive dialogue there, but I think we have to pay attention to what their intentions. We want the Arctic to remain a safe, secure, environmentally sound location. When they had the environmental mess, when the permafrost, you know, caused a structure to fail and it spread oil across 7 to 8 miles of water, we offered to help. I think we were going to continue to stay on the high ground, continue to be a good environmental partner to find common places, but we also have to pay attention to, you know, what people say and what they do. I think there's a gap there between the audio and the video sometimes, and we need to call that out as appropriate.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think it's fair to say that, as you mentioned, Russia and the other partner nations, there are some aligned interests there, but there is more of an adversarial tone as we look at China. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Senator. And I kind of try to use the term competitive and avoid adversarial, but there's not a lot of space between those two terms sometimes.
Got it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Our rounds of questioning have come to a close. The hearing record will remain open for 2 weeks until November 2nd. And any senators who would like to submit questions for the record should do so by November 2nd. We ask that your responses be returned to the committee as quickly as possible and in no case later than 2 weeks after receipt. That concludes today's hearing. Thank you again.